What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's Lumix Live. We've got a whole lot of information to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the new 35mm f1.8. We're going to be talking about the firmware updates that came out for the S Series zoom lenses as well. And for everyone that's joining us that's more G series focused or GH series focused, we're also going to be covering the Gh5 Mark II firmware update that we announced as well with the 35mm announcement. So tons of information. I know there's going to be a lot of questions that people may have. You may want some clarity on certain things. So definitely drop your questions in the chat. I am here to answer questions that you guys may have, if I can answer them. Obviously, there are questions that you guys have asked in the past that I don't have answers to, but definitely still drop them in the chat because it's always good to at least see what people are asking about. If this is the first time you're joining us for these Lumix live streams, these are weekly broadcasts that we do here on YouTube. Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, this time that we're working on right now, where we talk about products, we talk about photography, videography, color grading, pretty much anything under the sun. And most of the content that we actually produce is driven by the interactions that I have with everyone out in the different forums. So questions that I see all of you asking in all these different places. So if you have suggestions for future topics, if you have questions that you want to have answered that we've never covered here before, you've got a couple ways to actually let us know that these are topics you want to be covered on this channel. Either drop the comment down in the chat or in the comments after the video has been posted, or you can shoot us an email over at lumixlive@us.panasonic.com. That email address is shown at the end of the stream in the end card. So that goes right into one of my inboxes that I can at least see, kind of get an idea of questions that y'all might have. The other kind of cool things that we do with these streams is we hold AMAs, where literally we'll be not necessarily on one particular topic, but we'll talk and answer questions on a wide variety of cameras and lenses. So just because we're talking about the Gh5 Mark II and the S Series lenses today does not mean that, questions about FZ cameras or ZS cameras or LX cameras is off limits. Feel free to ask them in the chat. If I can get to them during the stream, I'll definitely get to them during the stream. Otherwise, we'll end up, collecting a whole bunch of them and creating another broadcast on, say, like point and shoots like what we've done in the past. So, outside of that, last housekeeping, kind of comment. If you do have a question for me, make sure to tag @Lumix Cameras before the question. So type the @ symbol and start typing Lumix Cameras. You'll see it'll autofill. This way it just pops up on my side. I can see it and differentiate it from the conversations that happen outside of the questions. So, like we always talk about, I want to remind everybody about the Lumix Pro Services platform that we have. This is a global program for support after you've purchased a camera or lens. In the United States, we have the LPS Red and LPS Platinum levels here. Our LPS Red is a free membership that if you are just going to be, getting your camera, you want that 3-year warranty, make sure to get yourself registered on it. It's free. All you need is one camera or one lens. Go to the website. If you're in the US, use the QR code on the screen. If you are not in the US, I will drop a link in the chat, which will bring you to all of the different regions that have an LPS program established currently. So that's dropped in the chat now. So the free program, it gets you your 3-year warranty, the 3-year extended manufacturer warranty. It gets you an online portal to track and manage any kind of service situations that you may have. But then there's the Platinum program. The Platinum program is our paid tier here in the United States. This is for users that are going to be, maybe a little bit harder on your equipment. You get your 3-year extended warranty. You get 2-day repairs with the next day shipping both ways. You get 20% off out of warranty repairs if you drop or damage your equipment. You also get Probably the more important thing for a lot of people is you get the access to a hotline here in the United States where you can actually call in and speak to someone in person if you've got issues or challenges with your equipment and you want some guidance there. You also get sensor cleanings and EVF cleanings and all that kind of stuff, firmware updates being done by our team if you prefer a service center to do it for you. So you have tons of options out there, tons of really cool things that you get when you go into the Platinum Series. If you're not in the US, they have other versions of the different tiers available, so make sure to take a look at that link that I dropped in the chat, and you'll be able to see if it's available in your region and what the requirements are to get into the different tiers for your country. So, let's see here. Let's see, we've got some questions here, well, a couple that came in here and some comments. And also, if you haven't noticed, I did drop a poll in the chat here right before we started, just kind of gauging, which of the focal lengths are you most excited about? The 24, 35, 50, or 85? And we'll also talk about it. We did also announce that we will be developing, or we are developing, an 18mm f1.8 as well for the S Series. So if that's a lens that you're interested in, drop that answer down in the chat. I know I'm super excited about it. I love this whole f1.8 series. As you can see, I've got my set all ready to go right here on my S5, and they are lovely lenses. All right, let's see. Oryx says, since the 12mm 1.4 is my favorite lens for your Gh5, I'd most likely go with the 24 for L-mount. Yeah, that's kind of what I've done for a pretty large portion of the time before the 35mm came out. Let's see here. Mark says, I would able to answer today's question only after testing all of those lenses. Sadly, it's not possible in my country. Well, definitely, shoot me what your question is. If it's something that maybe those of us that have worked with these lenses before, maybe we can help guide somewhat of a direction for you. I know that lenses, not every country has all the lenses yet, but in a lot of cases, I know that they're either already shipping or they're right about on their way. So, Richard Wong, hey Richard, how are you? Says, which is your favorite of the 1.8 series? That is hands down the 35mm. The 35mm is hands down my favorite focal length ever. I know a lot of people, kind of go back and forth about, a 35 or a 50. For a lot of the shooting I do, I mean, yes, I lean much more towards landscape photography and some street photography, but a lot of times the 35 is just what I love to go to. I have, on my cabinet back here, I have an old 35 Sumeron from the Leica M series that I love to mount up to my S series with my little basic adapter. So having a native 1.8 that focuses ridiculously fast on our system, that has incredibly limited to no focus breathing, and it's just awesome. And it's ridiculously sharp. We're going to take a look at some of the pictures I took of my dog because I've just been so busy. I haven't had a ton of time to go out and shoot a bunch of samples that I can share publicly. I did take a bunch of photos with this lens over at the Formula One race here in Austin. But since that was working for a friend of mine, I can't share those images out publicly. So 35 is probably my favorite. It is my favorite lens. Let's see here. 18 is quite interesting. I only just got your 24mm from Scott, a long way here in the US. Are lenses selling that well, or shortages holding things up? The lenses are selling incredibly well. I think the f1.8 series, in their price per performance ratio and just the general quality and the overall reviews that we've been getting on these lenses, has made a pretty big run for, affordable, compact, native mount lenses for the system. Yes, there are the Sigma there are Sigma focal lengths in the same area. But, you're either looking at a 1.4, which is typically very large, or you're looking at a 1.4 or 1.2, and they're typically very large or expensive. Or you're looking at a 2 or a 2.8. It's just nice that all of these lenses are coming out, but ultimately, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, there are a ton of users that I'm interacting with directly that are making the shift over to these lenses from a lot of other options that they have been using for a while, because of the fact that they're the same exterior chassis, the same filter thread, same general balance and weight. So video users, the gimbal side of this is going to be, next to none when it comes to an experience for actually using these lenses. And now that we have the BS1H out as well, which is what I'm filming on right now, we're seeing a lot of users that work with box type cameras, or even the S1H, adopting this series, because 1.8 is more than fast enough for the vast majority of shooting. And that added benefit of it's a single filter thread that you have to worry about means that your overall kit gets less expensive if you're not someone who's going to filter every single one of your lenses. So, yeah. These lenses, like across the board, they're just selling out like crazy. So the biggest thing I can advise anybody here in the United States, check around at all of our US dealers. If you go to the shop.panasonic.com website, we have a retail locator on the page. When you go to the product page for what you're looking for, that'll reach out and look at all the different dealers that we sell products through. And more likely than not, you'll be able to find someone that has the lens. If your main, kind of primary retailer might not have it, someone will have the lens typically, short of, if there is, kind of any delay in getting product. Let's see here. The 18 millimeter, you have the 24. Yes, the 18 is going to be awesome. Just got the 50 a couple days ago. Looking forward to shoot with it. 18 millimeter is awesome. I kind of figured a lot of people would be excited about an 18 millimeter because it's just expanding more on the L mount. Rugged says, do you recall if there is base ISO for photo mode on the S5? If so, I'm guessing the end of that is, what is it? If you're in photography, if you're shooting photos with this camera in anything but the Cine D profiles, your base ISOs, or what filmmakers would call native ISOs, would be 100 and 640. So not as big of a jump for the video side. Video side is going to be 400 and 640 and 4000. That's the number. It's been a long day. All right. Been contemplating the 10 to 25 f1.7 for low light wedding parties, full-time wedding videographers. So you're investing for the future. The 10 to 25 and the 25 to 50 are solid lenses if you're on the Micro Four Thirds platform, which is awesome, especially if you're pairing them with something like the Gh5 Mark II. Or once we release more information about the Gh6, I'm sure everyone's going to be super stoked, especially with that lens pairing, because it's just such an awesome set of lenses for someone that's actively out shooting. I think f1.8 is a sweet spot for prime lenses for price to bokeh light capture capabilities. 1.4 and 1.2 are just too expensive for small incremental advantages. Yeah, f1.2 and 1.4 are great apertures to have. I mean, our 50 f1.4 S Pro is kind of like it's what's considered a reference series lens, so it's going to be more expensive than the rest. It's going to be built to much higher standards. It's going to be that kind of over-the-top sharpness and rendering that you get. But yeah, 1.8 series have always been a very, kind of cost-effective way to get into fast aperture shooting. But the whole game's actually changed over the last couple of years. We talked about this when the 24 millimeter came out, because there were a lot of questions as to, well, why is the 24 millimeter so expensive? It's about $1,000. And I think what we've seen over the last, couple of years in optic development is that you don't necessarily have to just settle with an f1.8 that's pretty good in most categories. A lot of our lenses, if I switch over to this camera, if you look at all of them together, there's the whole kind of design concept. The fact that all of these lenses are designed to be, the same exterior housing, that they're designed to be the same aperture, the same filter thread, same weight, same balance, the same distribution across the board for just the way that they're going to work and handle. And that takes development. That takes, an optics engineer that really knows what what they're doing to be able to create a really high quality lens within an exterior bound that, is a design target that we're going for. So these lenses are phenomenal for someone who's actually really, working on that kind of level. And for the rest of us that might not be working on a crazy high-end level, they're just super fun to shoot with, because I can throw that whole pack in my bag, which I'm going to be doing next week when I take my holiday. Being able to just throw those lenses in my bag, and it's just one bag, and I've got all my focal lengths that I love using. It's awesome. And for those that do shoot things like infrared photography, the 35 is a just stellar performing lens for infrared and all the other non-standard styles of photography that people may be doing. Okay, any idea on shipping on the 35mm pre-orders? So I believe I read that shipping should be by the end of November into December, so it's gonna, most likely that's just gonna come down to pre-order lists and when the retailers actually get them in their warehouses. The end of the year is definitely a little bit more of a challenging time for actually getting inventory in. When I was a buyer at a photo retailer, holiday season was always the hardest to make sure that you always had enough inventory coming in. But yeah, you guys should be seeing them, I believe, by the end of this month through next month. But check with your retailer. At least here in the US, I can speak only for the US shipping and delivery, that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Carl, will the 18mm have the same form factor as the other f1.8 lenses? If you read the press release, we just talk about that it's an 18mm f1.8 series. I will take a look and see what, if we have an actual lens lineup image of this stuff, and I will get back to you. Jamie says, love this series of lenses. I'm looking to buy the 85mm start since you own the 20 to 60mm kit. Yeah, the 85 is a solid option with the S5 kit. If you're someone who loves doing portraiture, 85mm is a really nice focal length to work with. I know a lot of people, if you read in the chat or in the forums, they tend to like 135, maybe a little bit better for distortion. But yeah, the 85, it's super crisp. It's nice and sharp. And again, you've got a normalized filter thread on it that you can use, pretty much anything you want with it, and you're going to be perfectly set. Trini Media, I'm loving the 1.8 series. I'm looking forward to the 18. Will there be a longer focal length than the 85? We haven't commented or stated anything past what we've announced. Which brings me to a good point. So if you take a look over at the webpage here, this is over on our global Panasonic website. This shows you the current lens lineup. It's not 100% updated just yet. So things like the announcement of the 18mm hasn't been added to this webpage yet. Sometimes that stuff can just take a little bit of time, to get pushed onto the site. But you'll see that we've got that 35mm f1.8, the 24mm f1.8, 85 and 50 are all listed here. Sales scheduled for 2020 or later is a large aperture wide-angle zoom. And then, as we mentioned, we've now announced that it is an 18mm f1.8 that will be coming soon as well. So, I think we've harped on the lens enough for the moment. I know that we've got some other things that we want to talk about before we jump into actually taking a look at some of the actual sample images that I've shot with the 35mm. But I want to make sure that we take a little bit of time to cover the Gh5 Mark II firmware. A lot of times when we do a product announcement and also a firmware announcement, a lot of times a firmware announcement gets like, oh, okay, oh yeah, that's right, there's a firmware announcement. So we're back over here looking at the global page, and again, I'll drop this down in the chat so y'all can have a link to where you can read this on your own. But we announced on the 9th that the Gh5 Mark II will be getting the promised firmware update from when we first launched the camera. And that firmware update is going to be available on November 30th, 1 o'clock UTC. So I believe that comes out to something like 8 p.m. on the 29th in the East Coast. I'm horrible with time zone changes, but 1 o'clock UTC on November 30th. And this firmware update is going to add a lot of new functionality to the camera for anyone that might be actually shooting and working with the Gh5 Mark II where you want expanded streaming functionality. So right off the bat, the camera's getting RTSP and RTP, RTSP streaming functionality up to 4K 60p at 50 megabit per second. So if you've been using something like the box cameras, so the BGH1 or a BS1H, the wired LAN streaming that this camera is going to be giving you is going to be able to basically match what you can do on one of the box cameras. So this lets you do 4K 60p RTSP streaming out, which means if you've got a vMix or any other kind of switching system that allows you to take in an RTSP video feed, it's going to accept it from here. It also means that we've expanded the Rtmp streaming. If you're not familiar with what Rtmp versus RTSP is, Rtmp would be directly out into something like YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, any other platform that lets you just load video to an address. And the improvement here is that when you're doing things like 4K, or when you're doing things like wireless streaming, not a whole lot changes, right? You can do 4K 60p, you can, or 1080 60p, you can, which is what we've been able to do already. The thing that this firmware update adds is the ability to hardwire your phone to your camera and get a much more stable internet connection out of it. So you get to skip that extra Wi-Fi bridge that happens between the camera and your mobile device just to get up into the internet. So basically your phone acts as like a portable hotspot that's wired in. And the advantage there is that with Rtmp and the USB streaming, you're going to be able to do up to 4K 30p in direct out into YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, any of the platforms that work for that. And that'll be a 12.5 megabit per second. If you want to do anything higher than that 16 or 12.5 megabit per second, if you're in, say, like 4K, that's where you have to switch over to doing something like RTSP and then use some sort of software to then encode and send it up online. So that's a big update that's added for the streaming functionality. The other cool thing is that you'll be able to connect your Gh5 Mark II into a network and control multiple cameras using the LUMIX Tether PC software when you have updates coming. So you're going to have a lot more flexibility out of a more traditional mirrorless designed camera than something like the box cameras if you're not looking for something that's always going to be static and set in place like how I use my cameras here. So really cool stuff coming for that. If you haven't seen the images yet, I'll pull my Gh5 Mark II up because I have gotten questions as well. How does this work? Well, the camera, you just take a USB-C LAN or Ethernet connector, plug it in, and this will let you plug an RJ45, just Ethernet connector into it, and plug right into your network. Otherwise, it's just going to be USB-C into USB-C or Lightning on your mobile device if you've got that kind of connection there. So before I move to the other setups, let's see, what's the other question here? Carl asks, will it be possible to bring streaming functionality to the S Series via firmware update? Truthfully, I'm not sure. I don't know if there are hardware additions in the Gh5 Mark II that are what are allowing us to do this with the camera. But it is a question that has been brought up. I know I've brought it up. I know that the question's been asked a number of times on the streams. So we'll definitely continue asking and see if it's something that the S Series camera, the existing S Series cameras could support it. But yeah, that's a good question. McMedian film, it's a game changer. Yeah, it definitely is a really solid improvement for a camera that, there's a lot of questions about, well, what about firmware updates for the Gh5? We have the Gh5 Mark II. And the fact is, and we've talked about this before, the Gh5 pretty much got pushed as far as that sensor and processor combination was able to go. The Mark II only came out because of the fact that we want to keep this form factor around. There are so many people that love the GH platform and have equipment for the GH platform. So underwater videographers and photographers, the cages that y'all have purchased for those cameras, being able to get an updated internals version of the camera, that means it's going to get more future firmware support. It means that you're not having to buy all new support kit just because the new camera came out. Let's see here. As I only have the 24-105, maybe someone who has a 24-1.8 could tell me if the lens also have issues with distortions, moire, etc., which you have in your lens. So moire isn't directly something that's going to be on. I think how to properly explain this. Moire isn't really something that a lens is going to have a huge impact on. The bigger thing is going to be whether or not your sensor has an optical low-pass filter. If you're shooting with an S5, an S1, or an S1R, the sharper the lenses are and the higher quality they are, you can run into some issues where you may be getting some moire with certain types of patterns. Ultra-high resolution cameras tend to not have as big of a problem with this, but comparing the 24 to the 24-105, the 24-1.4 is going to have much less distortion. You're going to have more control over depth of field. You're going to have the same focus breathing control that you see in the 24-105. You're just in a fixed focal length lens. So there's some bigger differences there. McMedian Films. That's it. Was already toying with the Gh5 Mark II. Now it makes sense as I'm live streaming some weddings. Yeah, the Gh5 Mark II becomes an incredibly solid tool for someone who's going to be doing live streaming and broadcasting from the field. Even if you've got something where you're in a facility that has an actual internet infrastructure, you could plug this camera right into the hardwire and get the highest quality streaming out of it. Or go into something like a USB internet hub and boost your signals that way. It's a really solid thing. And we've done 2 live streams utilizing the wireless broadcasting function. If you go back and take a look in the LumixLive catalog, we've got 2 different broadcasts. One from downtown Austin, one from a little bit out of downtown where I was basically on a cliffside. And that was just using the 5G connection from my mobile device. Let's see here. I wonder if you can connect USB to RJ45, then connect a printer to print directly from camera. Probably not. Though I think the cameras still do have that old archaic pick bridge connection that some printers had for a while, where you could plug it directly into the printer and go, and that was done over USB. That might still be possible, USB over that, if the camera prompts you and says pick bridge. So technically there's still maybe a way to do it. Alan says, you've mentioned that getting audio over USB has been a problem, but I have a webcam that does this easily. Please ask the developers to get Gh5 Mark II audio through USB for webcam use. Webcams and interchangeable lens cameras are massively different architectures and designs. Just because it works in one does not mean it's going to work in the other. A lot of it comes down to how that image is being processed, what type of processing is being done to it, but it is something that we have asked them a few times if it's possible to do. What I do know is that if you look at the Ethernet connections over the cameras like the BGH1 or the BS1H or the Gh5 Mark II when the firmware comes out, the RTSP kind of streaming functionality does transmit audio. So there are ways to do it, but you also have to remember that the Ethernet connections on this are gigabit connections, and it's a very different, that's sending it out in either an H.265 or an H.264 compression in a file that's going out. So, yeah. Let's see here. Jake says, if I shoot at 6K versus 4K resolution, will moire be less prevalent if I don't have an AA filter? I may have to defer that one to the chat for anyone who may be shooting more moire-prone environments. I believe if you shoot higher resolution and then downsample in post, you'll probably get a little bit better result. Though the downsampling and the downres that is done in camera from 4K when you're on an S1, like camera like an S1, S5, or S1H, it has algorithms built in to suppress moire as well. So, truthfully, if you've got a lot of it, you're probably going to want to end up having to mask out some of it in post. Or you could always do something like a Pro Mist filter that's going to soften the image a little bit, so you're not going to have that ultra harsh crispness of an image. But that can help with things like moire as well. It's not as I'd say fine-tuned as a low-pass filter, but it's definitely something that can kind of help there. Let's see here. FC says, is it possible to manually focus from the Sync app or LUMIX Tether app? Yes, it is. It's a little... it's not the most streamlined way with the LUMIX Sync app, but LUMIX Tether 100% you can. You literally just tap a box, and then it's got a buttons left and right, and then it moves it in stages. The mobile device, it's a little bit more challenging because it's a touch interface versus using like a button kind of interface, so it's a little bit more challenging on the mobile device. Let's see here. I really want a good zoom, like a 24-70 f2.8, but at a lower price point. Any upcoming lens for that? I already have the 20-60, but I'm looking to upgrade. The 24-70 from us, it's an S Pro series lens, so it's going to be a premium series optic. The truth is, really high quality lenses from any manufacturer are always going to be more expensive. I hate saying the word, investment in lenses. There was a whole post the other day on Facebook about, that using the term investment, because it's very subjective to the person that's asking the question. But I am a firm believer that when you're shooting with a system and you know that you're going to stay in a system, look for the lenses that are actually the higher quality. The 24-70 f2.8 from us is, head and shoulders above a lot of the rest of the competition. But to be totally transparent, there are also other 24-70 f2.8s available in L mount. You're going to have to deal with some trade-offs if you go to some of those other lenses, but take a look around. There are a couple other ones out there. I still firmly believe, yes, I work for the company, but I still do firmly believe ours is the best one in the category. Cool. So last thing I wanted to mention about the Gh5 Mark II firmware update for those users that are on that platform is that this is the firmware update that's also bringing things like Live View Composite into the Gh5 Mark II. So it's going to be that kind of smart bulb mode where you can, actually watch the image build on the back of the screen. Excuse me. So that you can watch the image build on the back of the screen and, stop it when it looks the way you want. So great for astrophotography, light painting, even just kind of doing general night-ish photography. Live View Composite can be a really solid option. Oh, awesome. Dennis is in the chat and explaining about things like, things it looks like. So about 1080p, avoid shooting at this resolution on, it seems like there is linear line skipping. There's a lot of, so there's definitely, I'm like 99% sure it's not line skipping or binning, Dennis. We call those things out if we're using those technologies. Technologies. But, yeah. So, okay. So, like I was saying, the last thing here with the the Gh5 Mark II also is that, so you'll have the ability to do, connect into Lumix Tether via LAN. Multi-cameras can be controlled through it. And the Lumix Tether for multicam software and Lumix Tether software is also getting updated and has actually been updated, the multicam version, to control power zoom lenses via the Lumix Tether software. So if you're using any of our PZ lenses of the 2 that we made, you'll be able to actually control zoom through the software as well. Let's see, what other firmware updates had come out? Yes, the other update here that I wanted to cover with everybody is the update for, where is my link? Here it is. For the S series lenses, the 24-105, the 70-200 f2.8, the 24-7 or the 70-200 f4, and the 70-300. These 4 lenses all have new firmware updates, and these updates provide a couple of different improvements for the camera. So the 24-105 firmware update provides that lens 7.5 stops of stabilization when paired with an S1, S1R, or S1H. And that is basically bringing it in line with what the 70-200 was able to do when we released that firmware at launch. So that's a pretty big, substantial improvement for stabilization-wise. The 70-200 f4, again, it's more of a refinement of stabilization for video users. The 70-200 f4 version, there is an updated version of the firmware file available for download right now. So if you had already downloaded the firmware over the last couple of days, go back. There's a new version updated there that addresses a little issue that someone had brought up. And then the 70-300 also got a firmware update, again, improving stabilization for video users. And yeah, stills users, we still do see some of these benefits when you update your lenses with this stuff. Let's see here. Jake says, when monitoring on my Ninja 5, the menus of my S5 cover a small portion of the screen real estate on the Ninja. Do you know how to make the menus bigger and easier to see on the Ninja? So right now there is no scaling ability for the out over HDMI. It's set at whatever the scaling is when it comes out. So higher resolution monitors, the UI looks much smaller. Lower res monitors, it looks bigger. We have brought this up to the attention of our team to see if it's something that you can get updating. But I just honestly haven't heard back from them yet on that one. So let's see here. Would be cool if they add LAN functionality to the S1, S1R cameras. I agree, it would be awesome. I truthfully just don't know if the cameras have, if there's a hardware limitation. I haven't torn one of the cameras apart. And I don't know enough about the electronics internally to know whether or not you've got one there. Trinity Media says, can you do a live stream inviting filmmakers that use both G Series and S Series cameras to make short films and documentaries? Yeah, I mean, we've had filmmakers who work with both G Series and S Series. Carissa Dorson, when she launched when she worked with us on the launch for the BS1H, I mean, she films a lot of stuff with both Gh5s, EVA 1s, and she's shot with the box cameras before. So we definitely have had people on here, and we've advertised it, and we've kind of posted out there that we've got these filmmakers coming on, but not a lot of people show up to them. So it gets hard to keep doing a lot of those streams if people don't show up for them. But if you guys keep asking for them, we will keep trying to bring more filmmakers in. So let's see here. FC, with RTSP, Rtmp features, I wonder if more content creators live streaming sports game coverage that are not mainstream high school football game. Yeah, so there are a lot of platforms where this type of streaming capabilities are becoming incredibly useful for a lot of filmmakers. You're not having to stick with just those, the kind of lower quality IP style cameras. You could actually go to a much higher quality camera and get some really, really good quality video out of it and not have to necessarily, just deal with what's been available. Let's see. Frankie says, the updated firmware for the lenses worked great. Didn't think it was possible for stabilization to get better. Yeah, the 24-105, when we firmware updated the S1, S1R, and S1H to be able to do that 7.5 stops, the 24-105 really didn't have the firmware update at the time, so this really massively pushes it forward. Really gets it much closer in line with things like our 70-200 2.8 and the 70-200 f4 that already had it. It's way more noticeable when you're working with a 24mm field of view, just for how stable the thing is. Let's see here. Is it possible for Synchro scan to come to all the S series bodies? I don't want to say no, but that's what the S1H is for. Users that need to have much higher end functionality and features, you've got the S1H for right now. Will Lumix Sigma release an electronic extension tubes for the L mount? I've seen this question asked a lot online. I don't know of us making extension tubes. If any answer you'd get about Sigma would have to come from Sigma, so you'd probably just as good to go reach out to Sigma and see if they're ever going to make them. I believe there are some electronic extension tubes, but I haven't really ever used a lot of extension tubes, so it would be interesting if they did actually exist. I think there had been a set for before it was called the L mount, because it used to be called the T mount, then it was the SL mount, and then now it's the L mount. So just take a look at a couple of the different namings for the mount, because it may just be that a lot of that stuff just is categorized differently. Quick question. Gh5 Mark II using USB-C direct for live streaming means you can't charge in the port as well as the port is being used for that way around. Yes, that is correct. If you are using USB-C to broadcast with, because mobile devices typically, at least with my Z Flip, you have to choose either tethering or power delivery to the device. So if you are using USB-C to wire tether to your mobile device, you're not going to be able to actively charge it that way. A way around this for someone who's going to be doing much longer streaming, you could get the DCC coupler and the battery delete option for this, and then run it off something like a V-mount battery, or some of those like the nano V-mount batteries. That would get you way more than enough power needed for the camera. And yeah, you'd be pretty much set. But yeah, looking there, I think you've got some pretty good options for being able to actually power the camera for longer shooting like this. Jake says, would you say the 1.8 lenses all have consistent look to them when swapping them out during a shoot? Wondering if they could possibly take place of a set of Cine lenses for shoots. I think they do. I think these lenses all have a very similar color and design to them. They're going to be very, easy to match between each other. The biggest thing that you're really just going to notice is that, obviously, if you're already swapping lenses out and you're already working that way, it's just your field of view is changing. But that kind of brings actually into, a little bit of a good point. So I shot a couple of images earlier today. These are not anything super exciting. They're just pictures of my dog, but he was being super cooperative and dealing with me photographing him. So I took the 35mm and the 50mm and the 24mm shot. I just didn't have time to do it with my 85. But with just simple loading these into Lightroom, there's no major edits done to this, for clarity or anything like that. These are just bringing up shadows and highlights down. At 1.8, this lens is ridiculously sharp. 1.8 right here in the eyes from a little bit further away. Again, 1.8 as we render a little bit here. Pretty solid kind of sharpness out of, or this is actually at 3.2. At f5.6, the thing is ridiculously sharp with fur like his. And then even into at 1.8 here, again, it's pretty dang sharp if you've got someone who's really, you want to make sure you have an ultra crisp lens. Someone asked before, actually, I think it was Richard asked before about that focal length, which is my favorite focal length. And 35 millimeter is 100% my favorite focal length, especially because if you're ever doing general portraiture, stuff like this, like I photograph my dog all the time just because, well, why not? Look at him, he's awesome. 35 still gives me enough range to be able to get close enough and get that, kind of shallow depth of field, but managed, kind of distortion that happens when you just get closer with a wider lens. But I'm getting still a ridiculously sharp image out of it. Like the fact that you can see me in his eye right here. I don't know if the YouTube compression's going to actually, kind of crush this or destroy it, but you can see me in the frame, in his eye, in this shot. And this is shot at f1.8. 2,000th of a second at ISO 100. So it is a ridiculously sharp lens. But then when you start looking at, so that's the 35, if I go right over to like the 24 millimeter. So shooting at 24 millimeter, you get that much more elongated look. Editing's a little different in these because the light shifted a little bit. But you're still getting a really sharp 24 millimeter. Now I focused right here in the corner of his eye. Again, you get in here, it's a nice, sharp, crisp lens. You can still see me in there. I think the 35 is maybe a little bit sharper than the 24 millimeter. That could also just be my handheld capability and how much he was playing around with. And then when I jump over to that 50, you get that classic, kind of ultra shallow. This is a little too contrasty for my taste, but, you have a really solid set of lenses that you're going to be able to get ultra crisp. Hang on one second. We're going to hide this user. We're going to report this user and kick these people out. All right, so bear with me, everybody, as we just got kind of spam bombed by some, what I'm going to call scumbag in the chat. All right, so that one should be cleared out. Okay, so sorry about that, everybody. Let me go back and see what other kind of questions we had here. I just realized 1080p seems fine. Did some tests and say it isn't any more prone to aliasing in Moray than 6K and 4K. Yeah, I was... knowing your experiences with the cameras, that's why I get a little, I was a little confused by that, because I know for a fact we don't pixel bin and line skip and stuff like that. The S1R is different. The S1R, because of resolution, that's how you get some of the ultra higher fields of view out of it. So I know that there are some differences there, but the S1 and the S5, for anyone that's looking for kind of information about stuff like Moray and artifacting and color grading, stuff like that, Dennis over on Facebook is a pretty good wealth of knowledge over there. So let's see here. The S5 and 35 looks like a pretty perfect all-around combination. For some people, it definitely is. I'm one of them. What about a LUMIX 17mm f1.7, price and quality like the 2517 for the GX9? We've asked for a lot of, kind of more wide angle lenses for G series. I just don't have any info that I can, talk about. Even if I did know anything, I wouldn't really be able to talk about it anyway. Let's see here. I'm wondering about a roadmap for bodies. I'm running a Gh5 and I'm looking into full frame. Is there going to be a Mark II for the S1 and S5? Worried about the upgrading path in the future. I'm not the right person to ask this question. Truthfully, even if I did know or have a roadmap of, future cameras, I wouldn't be able to talk about it. But I am also the same person that will turn around and tell you, why worry about what's coming in the future if you have a need for something right now and it's going to fit what you're shooting and creating? If you're looking to get into the full frame series from us, the S5 is a solid option to get into the cameras. You're already looking, coming from a Gh5. You know that you might not know, but the S5 is very similar in size to the Gh5. So, yes, ergonomics are different. It's closer to the G9's ergonomics, of any of the cameras that we've had. But size-wise, you're going to get a camera that's going to be really, really solid to upgrade with in full frame. It's going to be small enough, travel-friendly. It's going to use similar batteries. You can't use your Gh5 batteries in the S5, unfortunately. But it's not a huge thing anymore these days. But truthfully, if the S5 ticks the boxes for what you're looking to do and what you want to shoot with, go for it. We're in the middle of the holidays, I'm comfortable in saying it. We're in the middle of the holiday season. Now's probably a good time to get into the cameras if you're looking to invest or buy into a system. Know that, we've already announced that we've got the GH6 coming. We just announced the 35. We just announced that we're going to have an 18mm f1.8 coming out in this series as well. Camera manufacturers will usually never announce, hey, we're going to have X, Y, and Z cameras coming in the future. Because that's kind of a pointless thing to do when it comes to cameras. But yeah, I would say be comfortable if you're looking at an S5 because you want something smaller, more compact. If you want something bigger, a little bit more hefty, a little bit more, kind of solid, the S1 is going to be an incredible tool for you. So you got plenty of options here. Dennis says spam. Yep. Hopefully I got that out of there. Looks like we got them pretty good. Impressive quality. Hope be able to rent and test these 35s in your country somehow one day. Yeah, definitely just keep on your local regions to see if you'll be able to get lenses for testing or loaners, stuff like that. Let's see here, Dennis. Speaking of an S1R, a cinema camera with that sensor would be insane. I can't say that I don't disagree with you, though primarily the S1R for me, it's a stills camera. That's how we build it from day one. That's how that sensor was designed. I know that probably triggered a bunch of people who really want the S1R to have a bunch of video features, but that camera was designed as a photographer's tool from day one, and to be like that high-res camera. So, yeah, sorry. Let's see here. Trinity Media says, the S5 is decent, but I prefer the S1H to the recording options. Yes. Those are a lot of things that you want to take into consideration. If you're looking at, you know that you're going to have to record really long term, like long time recordings. Yeah, go with an S1H. It's what it's designed to do. That's, it's designed to be every bit as a camcorder as it is a mirrorless camera. An S5, you can still film tons of stuff with it. You can still do long form recording. It's just going to matter of what resolutions do you want to shoot at? Do you need 10-bit or do you not need 10-bit? Hang on. We're going to report this user. Our buddy is back trying to drop more crap in the chat. So, in the entire year and a half, well, almost 2 years that I've been doing these streams, that's the first time that's actually happened. So, cool. I guess, does that mean that, I've made it? Or we've made it? We're going to hide user on this channel. Keep getting this crap out of here. All right, let's see here. Jake says, if you had to choose one LUMIX f1.8 lens to have for all-purpose shooting, would you choose the 50mm or 35? The nifty 50 is popular, but an argument could be made for a nifty 35. For my style of shooting, it's the 35. 50mm to me is a little too tight. Traditionally, and this is going to sound a little, kind of full of myself here, but when I was brought up and, kind of learned photography, it was, 50 millimeter was what I had to shoot with because that's what the school gave us as our kit lens to shoot with. 35 millimeter, if you look back through history of photography, 35 millimeter is the most common used for street photography and stuff like that. So, there's a reason why the original lights and Leica cameras had 35s. There's a reason why I have a bunch of them there. There's a reason why I got a 30 millimeter tattooed on me. It's my preferred focal length. I think most people can do a huge amount of photography. Maybe not videography, because that gets a lot more into the weeds of, optics choice and lensing, stuff like that. But I think 35 millimeter is that kind of one of those special focal lengths that you can pretty much do anything with. Especially with the technologies we've got now for things like photo merging and stuff like that. You can still do landscapes and panoramics with it, and it's still going to be incredibly solid. Yeah, so it's going to be 35 millimeter. 50 millimeter is cool. I love our 50. I love this whole set, but yeah, 35 millimeter is going to be my go-to. Let's see here. We had another comment here, or another question here, actually. I have two S5s and I love them for video, but for stills, they're always a little bit grainy. Why? Is this something different from the sensor or what? It's weird to adjust stills. Could you expand a little bit on what you mean for grainy? So like the shots that I just took here with the 35 millimeter. So if I go back into Lightroom, so these are with the S5. So, and these are just some basic editing. So, I mean, I don't know how much cleaner you could possibly ever really want an image. But this is 100 ISO. I've shot a lot with the 35 millimeter at much higher ISOs, 6400, 12,800. And it's a solid performing camera. So I'm curious what your threshold is for grainy. Yeah. Dan says, I would love to have all-eye codecs in the S5. Are there plans for all-eye in the future? Buy an S1H. Sorry, but the S5 is a less expensive camera. The S1H is the pro video camera. If you know that you need all intra and you need the higher frame rates, you need 6K, that's what the S5's for, or the S1H is for. I'm also not the person that could dictate one way or another whether or not there's going to be firmware updates and stuff like that. Let's see here. 50 millimeter is the field of view when you're looking through one eye. 35 is like looking through both eyes. It's close. I think it's actually 40 millimeter is a single eye for the average person. So the 45 millimeters actually tend to be a little bit closer. 50 is what was the more cost-effective to manufacture. It's usually a much easier optic design. We had that whole conversation on the stream a couple weeks ago. So yeah, that's a fairly comfortable way to describe it to somebody. 35 millimeter gets you pretty close to what you're seeing with both eyes. Let's see here. Cole says, as all the f1.8s are the same size, etc., why is there a price difference? How much time do you have? So I got plenty of time. It's a holiday here in the United States. Technically, our offices are closed, and we normally have off, but we wanted to make sure we got the stream out to everybody today. So, there is a misconception about size of a lens or the weight of a lens versus the quality of a lens or what the perceived cost should be. The fact is that every lens that's designed has to be developed. There's R&D time that goes into it. There's optics choices that have to be made. There's glass material choices that have to be made. There is ergonomic decisions that have to be made. There are teams and teams that end up actually, kind of all involved determining how a lens is supposed to be made and what its benchmarks are. Just because they all have the same size does not in any way mean that they should or would cost the same amount of money. The wider that you go in a field of view, the harder an optic is to design, which means you have to start using more exotic elements. You have to start using more exotic optics designs. You have a lot more restraints in what you're able to do, especially when you're looking at this and you're saying that these have to be the same size. So if I take my 35 and my 20, and actually I'll do this the most extreme for this series. So this is the 24, this is the 85 millimeter. They are the same size. The front elements are very different between these two. When you are designing in that kind of environment, you have to be basically on top of your game. Because materials cost more, because R&D costs more. That's why lenses cost different. Our 24 millimeter, yeah, it's on the more expensive side compared to the rest of the series. But if you also look at the rest of the industry, 24 millimeter and wider tends to be a more expensive lens than something like a 50. 50 tends to be one of the most inexpensive lenses, well, inexpensive lenses to make if you're not paying attention to things like focus breathing and the things that we pay attention to with them for optic corrections. So yeah, there's price differences just because of the fact that they're different lenses. They're not the same lens. So it's a little bit of my rant on that one. I've seen that question a lot recently. Let's see here. Frankie says 35mm has been my favorite for years, but 28 has grown on me. That's why I'm so excited for an 18 to use as wide angle and use 28 in 35 mode. Yeah, the 18mm I think is going to be a really fun lens for a lot of people that, want some good flexibility with a lens. Back when I shot DSLRs, 28mm, because, I was with a different camera allegiance at that time before I started working for Panasonic. It's definitely a really interesting focal length, and I think it's gotten a lot more popularity recently. So yeah, hopefully that 18mm fits that bill for some of you video shooters out there. Let's see here. Dennis would recommend external 6K B-RAW. Works even smoother in Resolve and less than 4K all intra. That is a very good point, Dennis. If you're using an S5 or an S1 and you're looking for all intra, yeah, shoot ProRes out over HDMI, shoot B-RAW, shoot ProRes RAW, depending on what editing software you use. That's your kind of really nice solid setup there. Richard, all those spams must be a sign the show's becoming more popular. I hope so. Which brings me to a good point. If you know somebody that would really get a lot out of these streams or wants to get involved with this, make sure to share out the streams to them. We do our advertising, but we're a brand. Word of mouth is always a really, really big help to these kinds of things. If you guys know people who would benefit from joining in on these conversations. Let's see here. Will there be a non-pro of the 24-70 f2.8 L-mount lens by Panasonic? I know Sigma makes one, but I'm curious to know. Even if I did know, I wouldn't be able to tell you. So, unfortunately, the only thing I can say is what we've talked about with the roadmap that we've kind of shown publicly, that we will have a large aperture wide angle zoom come out, and then we have the 18mm f1.8 that will be coming out soon as well. Well, not soon. We haven't really actually announced it. It will be coming out. Let's see here. Would be great if the stream would be more popular. Otherwise, it should deserve more. Yeah, I'm doing everything I can to get more and more people onto these streams. I agree about your dog picture, but still, it doesn't look like yours. It's wonderful for video. Same. This is also grainy. Okay, so Magnus, I'm definitely interested to see what you're describing as far as the grainy issues or the grainy look that you're getting out of your images. Feel free to shoot an email over to lumixlive@us.panasonic.com if you can send me a sample image to see what it looks like. Because I definitely would want to take a look at that, because there might be something not right with the combo, because the S5 and the S Series can produce some incredibly clean looking images. Yeah. So can you tell something about the minimum close focusing and maximum of this 1.8 series prime lens? Which lens is good for flowers? So as far as min and max focus distances here, let me pull up one of my lists here. Let's go. let me pull up. Truthfully, I honestly think the 35 is probably going to be one of the best kind of choices for you if you want to be shooting some close-up photography. So let's see here, 35 millimeter, 1.8 Lumix. Pull up my spec sheets here. Spec list. All right, so the minimum focus distance on the 35 millimeter f1.8 is 24 centimeters. And for those that don't know, that's not 24 centimeters from here. That's 24 centimeters from the sensor line. So where is it on this camera? It's that little line that is on the by the mode dial on a lot of the cameras. So that would be 24 centimeters from there, and you can shoot, wide open there. So that's going to be probably, I'd say, one of the better lenses to work with. I think it's L.I.S. Because you can still get a decent amount in frame. They're not going to be macro. You can still get a decent amount in frame, but you're going to be able to get, a tight enough image with enough, kind of solid bokeh out of that frame with, kind of balancing compression out of it. Otherwise, the 50 could be a really good option too. But I think 50 tends to look maybe a little too sterile of an image. It's a little too normal. And I think that's partially just maybe how much I've worked with these lenses for years. So Cole says, I wonder how much the 18mm f1.8 will be then. By the way, Sean, I missed at the start of the broadcast when we spoke on Facebook group the other day. Any news on an 18mm f1.8 from Alan? Yes, we have not stated anything about pricing on the 18mm. So Richard Wong also does awesome job covering gear. Yes, Richard is definitely awesome when it comes to covering gear. So definitely go take a look at some of his reviews and stuff too. Let's see here. Martin says, I brought a Gh5 Mark II and I used it to record side by side with my G9. Wanting to test pixel by pixel, 5.6K recording, but there's some strange color banding and skid tones visible on a 5.6K. Sent an email to lumixlive@panasonic.com a month ago trying to get you to provide a sample. Haven't heard back. Let me take a look through the emails, Martin. It's possible that it just may have not gotten where it was supposed to go. But yeah, I will take a look at our emails and see if I can find it for you, Martin. If not, if you resend it so that it goes back up to the top of the email list, that can help as well. But I will definitely take a look. Magnus says, can I send you a sample with video and stills? It's like it's wrong gamma. Yeah, Magnus, so if you, to that lumixlive@us.panasonic.com, if you send, start conversation with me over there, and then if you've got like a link, I'm happy to take a look at the image, the video and stills and kind of maybe help and find out what's going on. Tim says, I shot both photos and videos of the S5 and it's solid. Awesome. Yeah, 12mm f1.8. There's going to be an 18mm f1.8. Dennis, you get in touch with Nick Driftwood or work with him and ghosting smearing issues. He's eventually firmware fixed. Yeah, you can definitely reach out to Nick. I work directly for the company, so you can definitely... I'm going to be working direct with our engineers, so you can definitely try to help out there. By the way, something that would never happen with this... yeah. Good point, Dennis. Let's see here. Martin, email sent October 14th. Yeah, all right. I will take a look through the emails and see what we can find. All right. So with that, I want to thank everybody. This hour has blown by. You guys had a ton of really awesome questions. If you have more questions, feel free to continue the conversation through lumixlive@us.panasonic.com. Or what helps me out even more is if you reach out to us and follow and subscribe, all that kind of fun stuff over on our Instagram page. I monitor our Instagram page. It may not be an immediate response to everybody right away, but I monitor this page for us. It's instagram.com/LumixUSA. This is our US channel here, so This is where I end up basically most of the time interacting with people, continuing these conversations outside of Lumix Live. So feel free to, or hopefully I've encouraged you enough to go over and give us a follow over there. As a reminder, if you're looking for the firmware updates for your 70-200 or any of your zoom lenses, you've got the link right here. If you are looking for the Lumix Pro services, here is the international link dropped into the chat. If you are looking for the Lumix US Pro Services platform, here's the link for that one. I'm just going to blow the chat up with links. And then the other ones are all in there, so y'all can see the different links and everything for the different updates. So with that, I want to thank you, everybody, for joining us, for all of your awesome questions. We will be... what is next Thursday? Next Thursday is the 18th? Is next Thursday? Next Thursday is the 18th. Next Thursday's stream will be getting up posted pretty soon as well. So make sure to go follow us on Instagram for the links when we do actually post this stuff. And you'll be able to kind of keep up to date as when we actually post the link for that stream. The following week, which is Thanksgiving here in the United States, will be a recorded stream, so I will not be live on that day. I'm going to be taking time on vacation, starting at the end of next week. So with that, again, thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be live next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and I hope you all have a really good rest of your day and the rest of your week. Yeah, take care.